Hello and welcome to the show On the Spot. My name is Patrick Kamara. Now, Uganda's election process is heating up with a lot of events happening simultaneously this week, from the Kyagulanyi raid to a national media group banned from parliament premises, and the unopposed candidature exciting NRM supporters, among others. We are into the 5th week of the presidential campaign, and the first 4 weeks were largely peaceful. What is causing the changing climate in the election race across the board, both presidential and parliamentary elections? We digest all these tonight. Let me introduce my panel this evening. I have a candidate for the Nakawa East constituency on the Democratic Front ticket, Winfred Nakandi. Thank you for joining us, Winfred. Good evening.
Good evening, Patrick, and all viewers of NTV. I am glad to be here, and I am glad to be on the show with this fine gentleman. We have the treasurer for the National Unity Platform, Mr. Benjamin Katana. Thank you for joining us, Benjamin.
Thank you very much. My role is to collect from rich people like you. It's always a pleasure.
We have a political analyst, Mr. Andrew Mwenda. Thank you for joining us, Andrew.
You should mention that I'm also the old man of the clan.
But Andrew, if you are the old man of the clan, then I should be the head of the clan. Anyway.
The head of the clan is appointed by the Elders Council of the clan, of which I'm the chairman.
Gentlemen and lady, thank you so much for joining us. Let me begin with you. You know, this democratic experiment that we're having, every 5 years, we get into a period like this where we elect our leaders and then we say, yes, we are moving in, we're moving on, progressing as a democracy. Is it not just mutually ritualistic than being something that can actually usher in a leadership that is good, that is responsive, that can actually lift people out of poverty and give us a better dispensation?
Well, first of all, is that what you describe as ritualistic is the minimum consensus that the people of Uganda, when we went into the constitutional making process that led to the promulgation of the 1995 constitution, the people of Uganda agreed to a minimum consensus that this is how we are going to be governed, that this is how leadership is going to be arrived at the different levels in the country. It is true that on account of many factors, that consensus has largely been diluted. And that explains the conclusion by some observers, including yourself now, that this is ritualistic. But I think while it is ritualistic, or while it may appear as ritualistic, in many ways, it is also a vehicle through which the people of Uganda can express on how they want to be governed and who should govern them. But also that this experiment, weak as it may be, is the best that we have. Because, for example, in Uganda, we have had change of government previously through military takeovers, largely. But not just in Uganda, but also in other countries. But in those takeovers, you have had people lose lives. You have had countries go back in time. Because if you, for example, compare Uganda with some countries in the region, like Kenya, which has had relative stability and relative predictability in terms of how power changes hands, you realize that that stability has led to more progress in terms of economic growth as compared to Uganda. Because you have many people, for example, on account of those coups and wars, you have many people running away from Uganda, talented, skilled people running away, abandoning careers here. Now they are all over the world. You have businesses destroyed because people are running into exile, and then there's also violence. So if you compare it with elections, you realize that with all the challenges that elections have got, they still remain a better way through which people can express themselves on who should govern them.
When you look at the case, Benjamin, when you look at a case like Uganda, and maybe you just go to downtown and see the kind of impunity, the kind of disregard of the law, the kind of how people do things just anyhow, and you're like, probably maybe you needed somebody with a strong arm, some kind of maybe a benevolent dictator who can push people to do something for consistently for some time, and maybe we build a culture where we are responsible, where we can do things right. And sometimes you're like, is this democracy working for us?
No, I think the challenges you talk about are a result of a deficiency in our democracy, not results of democracy, but deficiency in our democracy. But number two, efficiency and good governance, which even includes having the right leaders and what have you, and that level of organization you would want to see in downtown and everywhere else are not exclusive of each other, because there are societies that are democratic, that are organized and are progressing. There are societies that have endured dictatorship in many parts of the world, but are as disorganized as those situations that you could talk about. In any case, if you look at the case of Uganda, if you may take the case of Uganda, the challenges we have of impunity do not point to democracy. They point to lack of democracy. But the disorganization, the impunity is because there is absence of the state. The state is weak, it is compromised. The politicians and powerful people have captured it. They only use it as a weapon to achieve personal goals instead of strengthening it to make sure that it plays the role it has to play.
Let me come to you, Andrew Menda. In your view, when you look at democracy, it is probably an experiment. It's largely young. We are probably still having teething problems of taking baby steps. But you would wonder, even in modern countries, just in 2021 in January, there was chaos in the capital of the United States, in D.C. Some people call it an insurrection. You wonder, is this democracy not suited for us? But also, if you see the developed countries, even them, they are still struggling. So can we say, maybe as we move on, we can perfect it? After all, it's a young experiment?
Well, I could put it this way, that first, democracy in Western countries, even if we assume that it works, evolved organically out of their changing social structure and the kind of social and political struggles it led. Those struggles were then led to the development of the kind of the institutions of democracy you see there. That experiment was transferred from there and superimposed in our society through copy and paste, through colonial conquest. We inherited it. In other words, we imported a software that may not be fitting in our hardware here. That is one. But even in the West, I wonder whether Western societies are successful because of democracy, or that they are successful by other factors, and democracy is either irrelevant or marginally relevant to their progress. Because if you go to China right now, it is going through rapid transformation without the democracy of the West. If you go to the Middle Eastern countries of the United Arab Emirates, every Ugandan wants to go to Dubai, you go to Qatar, you go to Saudi Arabia and elsewhere. I mean, where they have monarchies, you know, they work better than Western countries, actually. So in terms of providing services to their citizens, whether it's healthcare, education, having proper infrastructure. So I am not convinced, by the way, that democracy itself is necessarily a good thing. Let me ask you, Patrick and Benjamin, and my granddaughter's name is? Winfred. If you want, and this debate is what you read from Socrates. Socrates lived in between 469 and 404 BC. So he died actually in 399 BC. When the Greeks at that time are discussing democracy, and he says, if you are ill and you need surgery, do you look for the most handsome or the most articulate? person or you look for the highly skilled surgeon? When you want to build a house, do you look for the most the bespoke architect or the most competent architect? Now, these are small things, but the art of running a state is a much more complicated and important issue to be left to the whims of the hordes, of the public, to judge. You need, that's why you see the Chinese have this emphasis that we need leadership by selection, not by election. You must prove yourself from managing a small town to managing a province to being a member of the political bureau until you're qualified. So I think that this debate should remain open. We should not run away from it. Democracy may be as attractive to us as Christianity is, but it has its own problems.
But I hope you're mindful that the Chinese have 5,000 years of civilization when they reach here. So
yes,
that alone gives them a head start that is really big.
But that is also my point. Maybe we also have had a long history of civilization. We need to go back to our traditions and find that. But it's very difficult actually to go back there. We are so convinced that we need democracy. Let me give you an example of my grandson Benjamin here. So he has stated that Uganda, because Kenya has better democracy, it has more advanced than Uganda. I should tell you about 20, 30 years ago, Kenya's economy was 4 times that of Uganda. You can go and check the GDP numbers from IMF. Right now it's 2.15 times that of Uganda. So the Ugandan economy has grown faster than the Kenyan economy. If you look at the year 2000, for example, that's 25 years ago, Uganda exported goods to Kenya worth $16 million. Kenya exported goods to us worth $320 million. So they exported 20 times more than we exported to them. If you look at the numbers of 2024, Uganda exported goods to Kenya worth $830 million, Kenya to Uganda $850 million. It's a difference of a trade deficit of $11 million. It also shows you how best Uganda has performed in terms of its trade with
under what system?
With Kenya. Exactly. So when I go to Rwanda, certainly it's not as democratic as I find a government that is highly responsive to its citizens. By the way, I should tell you, by every measure of democracy, if you take democracy as how it is written in the Western textbook, Uganda is a much more democratic society than Rwanda. Whether you talk of the breadth of political participation, whether you talk of the depth of political contestation, because democracy has 2 pillars, participation and contestation. So there is greater contestation here, there is greater democratic participation. How many officials are elected in Uganda? Do you know we have about 1.8 million elected officials?
Yes, over a million.
So that shows the widespread participation, political participation, and elections are highly contested. But let me ask you guys, why is the Ugandan state not responsive to the basic needs of its citizens? Why? Just move around Kampala. Most people walk to work. You don't have street lights in the night. You don't have pedestrian sidewalks. You have roads that are falling apart. Everything is just, it's like a country tearing on the seams. But this country, in terms of political contestation, you cannot even argue statistically that Uganda has an entrenched group of leaders, with the exception of Museveni. Let me give you statistics. The current parliament has 536 elected members of parliament. Only 105 of those were in the previous parliament. Only 105, which shows you that more than 75% of the current members of parliament were not in the last parliament. The Ugandan voter, in every election, kicks out anything between 75 to 80% of mayors, LC5 chairmen, LC3 chairpersons, and members of parliament. There is a huge, Uganda has the highest anti-incumbency bias in the entire world. Second, Patrick and Benjamin and Winfred, we should look at. In these elections, the NRM primaries, 82% of NRM incumbents did not win their party's flag, meaning the Ugandan population is very keen on holding elected officials to account. They kick them out in every election. And that could be the problem. So that the politician knows I'm there for only 5 years, let me eat as much as I can because the chances that I'll be elected is another. That's not a failure of anything, it's a failure of the democratic process itself. But when we come to Uganda, Uganda blinds us because we are partisan, we are involved. So I'll give you an example of the most successful, or okay, not successful, but the most durable democracy in a poor country, India. In the 2014 elections in India, they have a parliament of about 560 members. There are 2,100 candidates contesting. 2,100, of whom 750 had criminal charges against them. When the election was done, 168 MPs elected had criminal charges, grave criminal charges against them, of whom 33 were elected from jail. Now, the Carnegie Endowment did a study, it's called When Crime Pays, and I would like every Ugandan to read it. And these people argue that in every election in India, the share of criminals grows by 2%. In every election, by 2%. And that a person with a criminal record has 3 times more chances of being elected to parliament than a person who is clean. The very democratic process tends to promote criminals. Now, let me bring it to Uganda here. If you look at the politicians who came with Museveni in the 80s, the Rugundas, the Kategeyas, the Mushegas, the Wapakabolos, the Dansalis, those people, they were highly public-spirited. But in every election, as electoral contestation has increased, the share of public-spirited individuals has been declining, and the share of crooks, buccaneers, wheeler dealers is increasing in the parliament. Why? Because to win an election, you need money. So somebody, when there is a public-spirited politician, he's not going to sell his house to deplete his savings to run, because
the people, the roles of an MP and what they're not supposed to be doing. The Electoral Commission has actually put up very stringent measures to see that we do not spend money in churches or fundraisers or burials and things like that. But because this has been done from the top, people expect certain things. There's a saying that a fish rots from the head. So if there is no goodwill from this government, from what we call the Independent Electoral Commission to curb this, it will not end. It is very unfortunate for us who are standing for different elective positions. I hear people say casually or loosely that to simply want to stand for member of parliament, you need at least 500 million. Now that definitely deprives the country of quality leaders. I plan to fundraise this evening. I'm seeing loaded people here, including the treasurer of the leading opposition political party. So I'm expecting to get some money here. But Patrick, we have so much work to do, for sure. But you see, this is something that the NRM has done deliberately, because they have the resources, they have the power, they have access to the national bag, I should say. Because, I mean, they have the capacity to get as much resources as they want to run a campaign. They will disguise it as anything but to get that money and run a campaign. And we have to run at their pace. You see how people usually want to, especially during these PLE and UNEP exams, where they say, you see, these children who are studying under trees are doing similar exams like the children that are being chauffeured to school every day in SUVs. So here we are, wanting to think this is a leveled ground between us who do not have the resources and the state. It is a deliberate move by the state.
If it is highly monetized, if you don't have money, can you even dare to get into it? Since it is highly monetized. We dare to dream, because we must offer an alternative to the nation. It is not a straight line. We definitely dare to dream, because, I mean, if we do not stand, then who will offer effective representation to the people? For example, of Nakawa East, if I do not stand. Okay, let me come back to you, Benjamin. When I'm listening to all of you, the issue, one at a time, gentlemen and lady, if I listen to you correctly, it looks like the issue of money is serious. But maybe if you compare with modern democracies, they seem to first, sort their economic and financial issues before they get into politics. Must we not maybe seek the kingdom of finances first before the kingdom of politics? Maybe that could give us better leaders. Because now here you get somebody straight from the university, Benjamin, you fall into politics and then you want to get money from there. But perhaps in other countries, you find somebody established 50 in their 60s, they have their money, now they get into politics, and that could be a different leader.
To the contrary, in established democracies, you have even young people without money in positions of responsibility. I think the challenges we have here are not challenges of democracy. And Andrew was talking about the software of democracy and then our hardware that is not compatible. I think there is need to invest in building of social consciousness, that the citizen, whether he's a member of parliament, whether he's a journalist, whether he's a man on the street, to know that he's part of a bigger community and his obligations are not only to himself and to his family, but to the community. And I think for some countries, even in the absence of democracy, for example, and he was giving examples of China, part of what explains the progress is that social consciousness, and it is even explained in like even in the, if you have read the Confucius theories and what have you, realize that they believe that as an individual you are part of a community and you have a duty to not just build yourself but to build a community. That social consciousness, to know that I am Patrick, but even as Patrick, I'm part of a community and I'm not just self-centered. I know that I can only thrive.
You're actually talking about the spirit of Ubuntu,
the community
in the African experience.
That is thriving. So that is lacking in our society. It's not attributable to democracy. Probably it's attributable to lack of it. The challenges that we have are not the creation of, even if Uganda has had a situation where we are not having even elections. We have had purely military governments. Now we are dealing with a pseudo-democracy. There are some elections, whether they... But even at that time, there was corruption. So the corruption is not, it has not been introduced by elections. For example, buying of voters goes against the spirit of democracy. So it cannot be used as an explanation for criminality, for corruption in our society.
Okay. Andrew, to avoid electing a criminal cabal to lead a country, don't we need to infuse in the African democracy that spirit of Ubuntu? You are, I am because you are. You know, because if you take the way I understand Ubuntu, perhaps it can give you people who are responsive, people who have a sense of integrity without a deficit of good things in them.
First of all, I should tell you, it is not true, as Benjamin says, that simply because a person is elected, he is likely to be responsive to the needs of the public. You should follow American politics. It's the oldest democracy in the world today. In America, practically every citizen, rather every member of Congress will go and the big tech, big pharma, the arms industry, all these big companies, the insurance companies, they are the lobbyists. You can vote as a voter, but these guys are the ones who finance these elections, and they determine the IPAC, the America-Israel something committee. That's why you see even Trump cannot go against Netanyahu. Why is it that every American politician will pander, even support a genocide in Israel? Because if you don't, these guys will come after you. The Israel-American something...
The Jewish lobby.
Public Action Committee, yes. Not the Jewish, the Israeli lobby, because part of it is American Jews, the other is the Christian right in America. So democracy itself can get a small influential group of people with money to control parliament, to capture the state. The arms industry, why is America forever? America has lived for 240 years this year. 240 years. Do you know of those, in 226 years, it has been at war. It is only in 14 years America has not been at war. Why? Because of the military-industrial complex. It funds elections. It influences what is discussed in the media. A lot of these journalists you see, CNN and whatever, debating, professors and think tanks are paid consultants of the banking industry, so it is not true. The democracy we have is a religion. We have assumptions about democracy that are very different from how it's practiced, even the way it was born. In America, why do you have very many homeless people? Why don't you have universal health care? So, this may come to Ubuntu. Why do you want Ubuntu to be fused with democracy? Why don't Africans say we need a government that is responsive to the needs of the public, a government that honors and upholds the principles of Ubuntu. That government does not necessarily need to be elected. You go to the Catholic Church, they don't elect priests. The Catholic Church runs hospitals, schools, and so many things trying to help people. We journalists, are we elected? Why do we get beaten and suffer so much in order to articulate, to expose corruption, fight for democracy and all this? Is he an elected official? Why is he public-spirited? So to be public-spirited does not require you to be elected, even to have freedom of speech and all this. These are fictions I don't agree with. If you look at the colonial state, it had so many weaknesses. It was racist, it was brutal. But colonial civil servants, including our parents who were trained by that, they served the public good. They were not elected. They were not elected. But they were not corrupt. They served the public good. It was, as he has himself said, a social consciousness. You must have a philosophy that you are there to serve the public. You must have a system that selects what we call them public-spirited people, people who are interested in public service. For those people to emerge, it does not necessarily need them to be elected. I don't think the judges of Uganda elect. In any case, by the way, I should tell you, democracy is very limited. Look at the international system. Tell me one international organization which is based on democratic principles that runs this world. Is it the IMF? Is it the World Bank? For most people, they work in companies. Are companies built on a democratic basis? Votes are determined by shares, not by individuals. So, outside of what we call the nation state, it's difficult to find an organization that is built on democratic principles. At home, you grew up in the home here in Uganda, you, Benjamin, was there a democracy where all of you kids and the father voted on what should happen?
Some aspects.
Really limited. So, you can say some aspects. So, I think that by us presenting democracy as the solution for everything in Africa, we have missed the point. Civil servants are not elected. So many people are not elected. We need to discuss how can we have a government that serves the common good.
How can we have, what can be the role of a vibrant citizenry with high civic competence in maybe ushering in better democracy?
So you started with a very good point. Actually, I like your idea, Ubuntu. So we have Ubuntu. How can we articulate that philosophy and it becomes the basis of government, not necessarily arguing a democracy? Ubuntu. Then we can teach Ubuntu in schools. I am because you are because I am, the collective. How can we begin teaching it in the church, in the school, in the public offices? And that is a philosophy that informs the government. I don't need to be, me as an individual, I'm a highly public-spirited person. So I'm very frustrated with the government of Mr. Yoweri Museveni, with the kind of the quality of infrastructure that is breaking apart. It breaks my heart every day. I find myself angry. I see many people driving in nice cars, they're not bothered. I feel myself bothered. I am not an elected official, and I'm not looking to ever be elected. So I'm aware that there are millions and millions of people out there who are not seeking elective politics, who are not involved in the concept called democracy, but who believe that we must fight and defend the public good. A government that is able to serve the people.
Winifred, if you listen to Andrew, there's that kind of frustration that yes, we have this democracy, but it is not giving us the services as we need them. There's a general brokenness of everything. And actually, I've heard some voices, people are saying, you know what, there's too much freedom here. Probably Uganda needs a dictator. I've heard people say something like that. Who would say, no, we don't. By the way, I've heard people say, you know what, there's too much freedom. There's a lot of, you know, we steal, we plunder, we do shoddy work, so that you need somebody who can push you for like 30 years, for a generation who is public spirited, but not elected, and make things right.
Patrick, what Andrew here is implying is we need a patriotic leader. We need patriotic leaders. And I actually don't subscribe to the school of thought that we have to teach Ubuntu or patriotism or anything like that. As long as we have leadership that is intentional on changing the lives of people, it will organically grow into the system of how people work and how the society functions. The fact that we have leaders and we have problems of people means that these leaders must work on the people's problems using the national budget. For example, we have water problems in Kampala. Kampala is flooding. One of the panelists was talking about leaders actually tending to the problems of the people. So what the Ubuntu here that Andrew is talking about can also be practiced through leaders actually working for their people. For example, the World Bank supported KCCA to develop a Kampala drainage master plan, which was supposed to work on the issues of flooding and water entering people's houses. Government of Uganda was supposed to commit 83.6 billion every year over a period of 10 years. Did they commit it? No. But has the government continued giving out money, 100 million to parliamentarians? Yes. Government has continued to give, what are they? What is it? Give big SUVs to former public officers who already have very many other interests, very many other privileges. So that is not Ubuntu. I guess what Andrew here is saying is we should use the resources that the country has to actually help the people get out of poverty, to actually help the people better themselves. If you look at the health sector, the education sector, yes, we need Ubuntu, we need leaders who know that these people are facing problems and they must be solved. KCCA in the previous 5 years needed about 10 trillion. They got only 28% of what they needed. But even of the 28%, 43% came from external financing. Does the country not have any money to actually work on KCCA issues? Yes, we have it. But does government actually prioritize the lives of people in Kampala? No, it doesn't. So what we mean here is we shall not shun away from democracy, because it is this democracy that is supposed to bring leaders at parliamentary level, leaders at local government. But do they actually have the problems of the people at heart? Yes, maybe they have them. Does government actually prioritize those problems? No, it doesn't.
Okay, Benjamin, if the people are going to elect a leader, probably they should be looking at what that leader is promising. In this case, a leader comes, a candidate with a manifesto. Do Ugandans even care? Do they even know what is in a manifesto of NRM or PFA or NUP or whatever it is? Because it looks like they are already polarized. I am for NUP or I am from NRM, and that's it. And they are not going to interrogate. What is it that you are bringing on table? And if you're not interrogating the proposition they are making, then are we even building on democracy?
Well, there's a section of the population that does. There are sections of the population that do not. But two, what are the tenets of democracy that we are saying that it does not work or it works? I think it would be wrong to analyze democracy using failures that are attributable to its absence. Because if you talk about, and even in those other democracies that we used as examples, India and the rest, the challenges are not attributable to presence of democracy, but attributable to weaknesses in that political dispensation in the particular country. Proposals, if I'm to come back to your question, proposals are very important, because the population then gets an opportunity to understand, if Patrick is running to be a councillor or a mayor, what is it that Patrick wants to do for the country? There is a tendency in this country for people to restrict, and I've seen many people who are contesting to say, oh, the roles of an MP are very well stipulated in the Constitution. But beyond what is written in the Constitution is that you're asking to be a leader. And leadership is largely about providing solutions to the challenges of the people. A leader must lead the population towards transformation, not just in terms of having infrastructure, but in terms of how they look at their outlook to life. They are being, and you talked about the citizens knowing what their duties and responsibilities are. That's the role of a leader, partly because the leader has convening power. You have 2 million people who have voted for you to be a leader in Kampala. if you choose to influence the thinking of these people positively for the transformation of that particular society, you have a higher advantage than one who has not been elected by these people. Because once people vote for you, then they trust in you. The challenge with our society is that is not even polarization. The challenge is that there is a culture that has been deliberately developed of reducing these processes into mere ticking of the box, into mere rituals. And to achieve that, you use money, you use manipulation of the population, and even the platforms that should have been very useful in shaping public perception and understanding of what is going on in the country many times are manipulated to play the reverse role. So the proposals are important, but unfortunately most times they are not given attention, because in these processes, elections, especially the debate, the people who shape debate and public discussion want to focus so much on emotions as opposed to ideas.
Andrew, you've poked holes in the democratic experiment that we have, especially here, but you have fallen short on giving what would be the alternative proposition that can be super good for Uganda.
But I thought you gave it, you said Ubuntu. I believe that the most important thing is how do we create a philosophy about government that allows it to serve the public. The way, even if democracy worked, I would say that the way it has evolved in the specific context of Uganda is injurious to the public good. Uganda today is not mismanaged because of less democracy. I don't agree. But because these arguments are held as religious beliefs, you have, like my grandson Benjamin, he has so many deeply entrenched convictions. He has a presupposition that democracy is an inherently good thing. He begins from that. So when it fails under its very dynamics, he wants to say it's because there are gaps in it. You can have, in fact, every day I pray that maybe Bobi Wine gets elected. Just take a practical example. If he gets elected in this election, NRM will have maybe 80% of parliament. So Bobi Wine comes to the cabinet and he's committed, I want to clean up government. To get his vote, NRM people frustrate him because they're the majority, right? What should he do? They're the ones who approve the budget, parliament does so. They're the ones who approve loans. If there's, what would Bobi Wine do as president? He may be forced to call upon the army, if it can support him, to whip them to get his way, or to violate the constitution. But if he wants to be a Democrat, he may have to bribe them. But if he bribes them, it means Benjamin and David Lewis and others around him, what will they do? They also want, they have constituents they have to feed. They have been out of power for so long now, they want also to drive good cars and nice houses and send their children to study abroad. How can he be giving money to the opponents and not them? So he will have opened the Pandora's box. The dilemmas he faces are just, the only way he would avoid the temptation to be undemocratic is using bribery. Because coercion, then it means he has to abolish the constitution, disregard it or whatever it is, call upon the police and them to reinforce his position. Because when Obama was elected, in the first 2 years, the Republicans came and took over both houses of Congress. They made it difficult for him. It was not in their interest to make him succeed. They needed him to not win a second term. So that is how democracy works. That has nothing to do with the... It is the way democracy is constructed. Of course, in Western countries, I have already told you that Western countries have so many things. They have a highly educated population, a richer population. They have traditions that have evolved over 300 years. There are so many things embedded there that may make the system worse. Democracy may be a cost to them, but the cost of democracy are mitigated by the other countervailing factors. Or maybe because it evolved organically from them, they have accumulated values, norms, habits, traditions that mitigate its worst effects. So, maybe they have deeply entrenched liberal values. They are embedded in the society that allow this thing to work. But what I can say, in its purest form here in Uganda, this man Museveni, you see, when I see Museveni is a pale shadow of the man who came and took power here. In fact, there is something I was reading. I want you guys to begin looking after 1996, when Museveni entered the elections. Now, where his presidency was dependent on the public whim, Museveni will not move against borders in Kampala. Why? They are voters. Vendors, they are voters. There's so many things you cannot do in Uganda. I did with Godeba Tumushabe, we did a study for the World Bank. We were hired by the World Bank as consultants. Something called ENR, Environment and Natural Resources Sector. Environment and Natural Resources. We went across the whole of Uganda, most of the districts. What did we find? Ordinary people, or rich people, but largely ordinary people, ordinary peasants, they invade wetlands, they invade forest reserves, national parks, game reserves, and stuff like that. In every case, it did not matter whether this district was under the control of UPC, DP, FDC, or NRM. This is 2011. Wherever they entered, civil servants working for NFA, or Uganda National Forest Authority, or NEMA, National Environmental Management Authority, or Uganda Wildlife Authority, would intervene and say people must leave. Each time they tried to enforce that rule, the local MP, the LC3 chairman, the LC5 chairman, elected officials intervened to protect their voters.
Okay.
Hold a second. So across the board, it did not matter which party was in power in that district, whether they were in Ugulu or Kanungu. In every case, without exception, the elected officials wanted to protect their voters. So the interest to be re-elected was against and in violation.
Re-elected eternally.
Yes, but these were MPs.
Yes.
But even Museveni himself, wherever he intervened to protect people who are encroaching on public lands, and therefore either cutting down forests, whatever it is that they are doing, or living in the swamps. These are protected areas. So the lesson I learned is that even Museveni himself, institutions structure incentives. Human beings respond to incentives. Museveni wants to win the vote. He's not going to antagonize key constituencies that are relevant to the vote in the name of enforcing the public good.
Okay.
He won't.
Winfred, now, the things that I've marked from Andrew Menda's submission, from 1986 to 1996, that is a different Museveni. But when he starts subjecting himself to periodic, elections, he sort of changes. So probably, if we had the term limits, most importantly, the term limits than even the age limits, maybe that could in a way change our democracy and be better, because you're not there eternally, so you're not talking about regime longevity and regime survival. So in the last term of your second service, you can say, let me do the right things. After all, I'm not going to be subjecting myself to another election.
Exactly. Presidential term limits and age limits, some of the major reforms that we are looking up to before even this election. I mean, electoral reforms that opposition political parties were envisaging before we went into another election. But well, it's unfortunate that nothing like that happened. But you see, General Museveni runs the country on patronage. He always has a group of people to keep on tenterhooks or to make happy. So in such a case, there is no deliberate effort to develop the country, but rather to entrench himself in power and, of course, his party. Now, in situations like that, there isn't so much that we can achieve as a country, because the leader, the president, is only looking up to the next general election. That's why, as we were starting this show, Patrick, you said, isn't it just ritualistic that we go into these general elections? These general elections, yes, will produce some members of parliament. Constituencies may have chance to change the members of parliament, just like you've seen in the NRM party primaries, because maybe some people with more money will come into the election. But at presidential level, the goodwill is not there from any stakeholder. Okay. Not the Electoral Commission, not security, not anything. And I can tell you, Patrick, because I'm running a parliamentary election campaign that voters are fatigued. I can read voter fatigue for sure. They are tired of voting. We have to encourage them to actually vote. I mean, they're tired of listening to us. So they also make it clear, what are you bringing for us? What do you bring on the table? Because they do not actually see any hope of change of guard, they do not see any hope of any fundamental change.
Okay. Benjamin, we have 8 presidential candidates now, right? And of course, it looks like a two-horse race between the Honorable Robert Kyagulanyi and Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. But I'm wondering, even yourselves, are you for sure in this election with a lot of confidence, with respect, that you are in it to win it? Yeah,
but before I answer that,
I'm asking this yes, because it will tell us that whoever is involved in this experiment, yes, whether it is Kasibante or it is Lira, is it Lira?
I'm coming to that.
They are here thinking they have a fair chance.
The examples that Andrew gave, for example, of NEMA, encroachment on wetlands and what have you, clearly paint the picture of absence of democracy, because democracy largely also operates on independent institutions of the state. Now, where the institutions of the state have been captured by politicians, including now the head of state, and they're using them to do politics, it does not point to democracy, but absence of democracy. So the challenge that he mentioned in itself is what we have been talking about. And when you are saying that doesn't Uganda need a dictator, I was laughing at you, but we have one who has captured these institutions of the state and is using them, controlling them to do politics. But coming back to your question, we are very confident that we stand a chance to take power through this process that is ongoing. We have concerns.
You are missing in over 207 constituencies where you don't even have a candidate.
We have concerns.
For parliamentary positions?
We have concerns about the lack of fairness, the overbearing involvement of the armed forces, the logistical challenges that most opposition parties face in societies like ours. But our confidence is born out of the knowledge that this is not the first entrenched regime to exist on the planet Earth. I am sure you're conversant with examples of places like Gambia, that through an election, the people were able to upset an entrenched dictatorship
of Yahya Jammeh.
So we believe that with all the challenges at hand, this is an opportunity through which the people of Uganda can use to change the trajectory of our country. Do we have challenges? Certainly, in the processes. And she has talked about voter apathy and things of that nature. But we believe that we have a duty and responsibility to rally the citizens that regardless of the frustrations that they have endured, that the solution is not in folding their arms and wishing away the government, but they must work towards changing that government.
Okay. Andrew, I want you to look at the current situation now. We have 8 presidential candidates, and the 6 of them, with all respect, I could imagine they are in this election, including General Muntu and Mubarak Munyagwa and all the Kasivantes, knowing really probably it's not taking them any far. What could be the game plan? What could be the intent?
Because these are the candidates.
Yes.
Well, I think they want to appear on the national record as having been serious people. I don't think any one of them has the slightest hope that they're going to win.
And does that include even Robert Kyagulanyi?
Well, Kyagulanyi at least is a competitive candidate. Even Nandala Mafabi, I can understand. And Muntu, maybe to make a statement. The others, those 4, I can say. The rest, I think, are Emperekezi. They are trying to make a name, at least to go in, to be written down in history as having run for president. You see, I should tell you, there is one area where I would agree with Benjamin, but for different reasons. You see, human beings, if we are dealing with a phone, a cup like this, a bottle, it's a material object. Its properties don't change based on what you think. So it exists independent of your sensory organs. Its material components, its organic structure exists independent of us. The thing with ideas is ideas have a two-way. What you think influences what you see. So for example, he has an assumption that democracy is a good thing. And if it fails, he does not attribute the failure to democracy. He thinks it's because it has not been perfectly implemented. Of course, he is wrong, but he believes that way. So he has an assumption, and that assumption influences how he looks at the political system of Uganda, and Ugandans will go to war to defend democracy, because it's a kind of religion people have acquired. So if you ask me, I think that you should keep democracy, since that's what people want. If you said, I'm going to remove democracy and I will bring something else, you may have a civil war. You see, people can fight a good idea because it's alien to them. It's not what they have been acculturated to think. Ugandans are acculturated to think that you are raised in a home. Maybe a home may not be the best place to raise children. So I don't know. But what I'm saying is, once you have an assumption, ideas influence our perceptions of things, and therefore those things, the way we see them, like a typical competitive democratic system I have demonstrated to him, can lead you to certain absurdities. I've given examples of India. It has nothing to do with that, and in India governments change hands. In Kenya, they have serious governance problems in Kenya because of competition in a poor country. In fact, I have seen studies where they say countries like Western countries adopted democracy after they had industrialized and been developed. There is no history where you had a peasant society. 70% are people living in rural areas and are poor. Then you bring democracy and it works there. We don't have that. But he still thinks that whatever failures happened in Uganda happened because of not us having democracy perfectly. In fact, perfect democracy here can even cause civil war, can cause very bad government. We need to be conscious of that. I've given an example. If Bobby Wine won and he doesn't have parliament, how NRM people can frustrate him, because the opposition have no interest. I saw it with Obama. You can see it with Trump right now. In this election, if the Democrats win, they will frustrate everything he wants to do. That is the way democracy is. If you define it, first of all, by the way, the concept you gave, democracy is a government of the people, by the people, for the people, was articulated in the 19th century. It was later found to be one thing. It's not true. What do you mean by the people? So the most definitive understanding of democracy was explained by Joseph Schumpeter in his 1940 book, Socialism, Democracy and Capitalism, where he argues democracy is about how to elect people into power and how to remove them. If you follow the procedures, are people free to organize around a shared interest, to aggregate and achieve their interest and place them on the national agenda? Can they assemble peacefully, use media and others to be elected? Now, you can see in Israel, why doesn't Netanyahu get elected? He's committing a genocide. They're going to hold elections in a few months. He's going to win. Because he's telling the Israelis that I'm the man protecting you. So for you to have absolute security, your neighbors must have absolute insecurity. By whipping up anti-Muslim sentiments, he is committing a genocide on TV. All of us are watching it. It's a democracy that is doing that. You go and look at America when they were going to invade Iraq. All these violations and the genocides they created there. Congress voted for it. They told lies, they manipulated the media and got what they wanted. That was democracy at work. It is not an anti-democratic process that led us there. In fact, I believe that for you to have peace in the Middle East, especially between Israel and the Palestinians, you may have to limit democracy in order to allow an enlightened government with a view that's not subject to whipping up ethnic. By the way, the Rwanda genocide took place in the context of liberalization that led to democracy, because there was a civil war. You are liberalizing. So for parties to win support, they had to take extreme positions. Parties that were moderate, Hutu parties that were moderate, were extinguished because the extremists were saying Hutu power, won the day. So it's not true that democracy will always deliver to you the best of things.
Okay, Winfred, you know, somehow I'm inclined to think that maybe Andrew is submitting a better argument, because when I look at some experiments in Africa that have worked, it works for some time, whether it's Botswana or even in Tanzania, and then in Ghana, before you know it again collapses. And when we're looking at it as a shining example, even Tanzania, you know, with the CCM, what just happened yesterday, what is happening right now, it tells you this experiment is failing.
But
Patrick, I'd like to ask the old man of the clan, Andrew. Andrew, what are the options? What are the alternatives now in our context? So who exactly are you going to give leadership to? Are you going to...
Actually, that's a very good question. First of all, to give you an answer, I don't know. In any case, I don't think I'm intelligent enough to define how Ugandans should organize a system. And in any case, what I would prefer is if Ugandans were to have an open conversation, what system of government, what system of selecting leaders, removing leaders, encouraging leaders, promoting leaders is best suited to our circumstances. If we open this to an open discussion, maybe we could find an answer. I cannot give an answer on my own. I'm not that intelligent. But the other thing is that, but you see, that debate will also take place in an intellectual environment where we believe no democracy, when leaders are elected, that they are good. So there are limitations. Even when I try to create a solution in my head, because I feel there is an intellectual limitation to us. Can we go outside? We have been informed that you need to be elected for you to have a good government.
Okay, exactly. Gentlemen and ladies.
Can we walk away from that?
Gentlemen and ladies, in the interest of time, let me do this.
Right.
I'm going to give you, each one of you 1 minute to give you a concluding remark. Let me begin with you, Benjamin.
Yeah. Africa has undergone a number of experiments. There has been a time when we had purely military governments in Nigeria, in all over the continent.
Today, the most shining example is Ibrahim Traore. Do you think he's doing a good job than any other democratically elected person?
Power.
Okay, let's continue.
Did Sani Abacha deliver transformation to Nigeria? He did not. So these challenges that we have cannot be attributable to democracy. They are attributable to much more factors. I think it is wrong for anybody to do a one-factor analysis, to say there is progress here because of absence of democracy, or there is progress here entirely because there is democracy. There are many factors, but the world has experienced autocracy. It has experienced different forms of government. Democracy has challenges. And for Africa particularly, because the system was superimposed, like he says, and I agree with him, it did not evolve organically. And it moved ahead of the transformation of societies. There are much more challenges than there are. But it is the best model that can help our country to move from one step where we are to another.
Andrew,
so you can see our intellectual limitation is that we are incapable of thinking outside of the box of democracy. We are stuck to it. And that's the point I was making. Because even if its weaknesses are glaring, we'll still argue that we can maybe perfect it. Personally, I think, first of all, I'm not so sure. Did Abacha fail because he was a military man or because he failed for other factors? Maybe the philosophy underlying the state in Africa is what we need to deal with. You may find that whether it was one-man rule, military rule, single-party rule, multi-party rule, all these may be marginal to the challenges we face. That actually the fundamental structure that could be failing us could be elsewhere. Maybe it could be the philosophy of government. In which case, whether you have a democracy, military rule, term limits, or monarchy, whatever it is, may be marginal. I'll give you an example. I've told you, have anyone of you been to Dubai? Then all these things they talk about are not there. Those people are advancing at a rate that is amazing. You go to Singapore, do they have democracy there? They don't have these things there. So the countries, Hong Kong transformed under British colonialism. It did not have, there was no democracy there in Hong Kong. Okay. You go to Macau, it was under Portuguese colonialism. Although elsewhere colonialism was a disaster. So perhaps we need to get out of the box called democracy versus dictatorship and think about what are the things that make a government work and serve the people outside of these conceptions of democracy, autocracy, authoritarianism, and all this. You may find that the form of government you have on top may have very little effect on how you manage a society that is responsive to the needs of the citizen. And I think that's where we need to begin.
Okay, Winfred, your parting shot.
Thank you so much, Patrick. Now, because Uganda is not a monarchy and we're not going back to colonialism, we need to have an honest conversation as a nation on how exactly to run the country and have patriotic leaders. You see, Patrick, we shall say all these things, but for as long as leaders are not patriotic enough to love their country and love their people and want to deliver diligent service, this conversation will continue. I am sure if Uganda as a country had leaders that stuck to the budget, were not greedy and not corrupt, and we had pure and diligent service delivery, we don't have this kind of conversation because we are not at war.
All right.
We're not at war as a country, so our problem here is service delivery. Our problem is poverty. Our problem is failed systems. So if our leaders were patriotic enough and honest enough, then we would have a better nation. But other than that, we are not going back to colonialism, definitely, and we're not running a monarchy. So this is all we have.
Thank you very much, Winfred Nakandi, parliamentary candidate for Nakawa East under Democratic Front. Thank you, Mr. Andrew Mwenda, our political analyst, and thank you, Mr. Benjamin Katana, with the treasurer of the National Unity Platform, and thank you for your...
The treasurer should give us money before we leave. Otherwise, we shall not vote for Bobby Wine.
Good night, and God bless Uganda.
Uganda.